This is Guantanamo Bay, the most controversial military base in the world, and it is located in the southeast region of Cuba. It is the oldest overseas U.S. naval base in the world, but it is known for its use as a prison and detention center for many people who are accused of being terrorists, and has garnered much attention for the ability to bypass U.S. laws and torture its people. We have imprisoned many innocent people there, as said by various leaks and whistleblowers. The land for the base was first conquered in 1898 after controlling the area following the Battle of Guantanamo Bay during the Spanish-American War. Following that war, the U.S. had control of Cuba and agreed to give Cuba independence as long as Cuba agreed to implement the Platt Amendment, which in short allows the U.S. to intervene in Cuban affairs and lease land for coaling stations and naval bases. In 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt, using the Platt Amendment, signed a lease with Cuba for Guantanamo Bay to be used as a site for a coaling station through the 1903 Cuban-American Treaty of Relations. Guantanamo Bay later became a naval base, providing a strategic base in the Caribbean that would be used as a station for Marines to quell a Cuban uprising in 1912, used for naval training through the lead-up of World War II, and later as a constant threat to the Communist President and Prime Minister of Cuba, Fidel Castro, during the Cold War until the 1990s. Gitmo was used as a holding facility following the 1991 Haitian coup. 21,000 Haitians sought refuge and were picked up and detained at Guantanamo Bay. Amid the AIDS epidemic, it was determined that Haitians were more likely to have HIV, and thus an extra camp within the base was made to detain HIV-positive Haitians called Camp Buckley. The conditions were horrific, the camp was overcrowded, and refugees were forcibly kept in the camp without due process. This was Gitmo's first time forcibly holding people on a mass scale. Following the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. started the preemptive war on terror and invaded Iraq and Afghanistan. The stated goal was to defeat terrorist groups like the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and preserve national security. The George W. Bush administration sought to detain members of the groups above the law to get intel on groups' plans and members. This left Guantanamo Bay as the perfect place to house these detainees, as its offshore location allowed it to avoid U.S. laws and be used as a black site. The suspected terrorists were ruled as unlawful combatants since they were adhering to a group instead of a nation. They were thus not protected from torture and poor living conditions under the Geneva Convention, and the base allowed the U.S. to skirt past U.S. laws, providing a legal black hole, as it was coined by Johann Stein, a South African judge known for dealing with human rights issues. The U.S. could torture prisoners, detain them without due process, and force them into awful living conditions by using Guantanamo Bay as the prison. Camp X-Ray was constructed as the temporary prison. Like Camp Buckley, Camp X-Ray was outside, surrounded by barbed wire with open-air cells. They wore shackles and gear to deprive them of sight and sound, and were not allowed out for exercise. Camp Delta was made later for more permanent containment and had marginally better conditions. Prisoners were allowed exercise and had concrete walls. Prisoner and CIA testimony revealed the use of torture in these facilities that was hidden under the name of enhanced interrogation techniques. Prisoners were deprived of their senses, being masked and shackled and muffled. The horrific torture methods include exposure to extreme elements, waterboarding, sexual humiliation, sexual harassment, rape, sleep deprivation, beatings, disrespect of religion, being forced to stand or crouch in painful positions, and more. Multiple people have been killed as a result of the torture faced at Guantanamo. Approximately 780 men and boys were held at Guantanamo over the course of the war. The vast majority of them were never charged with a crime. A leaked document exposed that the U.S. knowingly imprisoned at least 150 innocent people. Officially, 9 people have died while imprisoned at Guantanamo, and fewer than that were convicted through a fair trial process. The peak use of Gitmo has now passed, but there are still 15 people who remain in custody at Guantanamo Bay as of November 2025. And there is still major backlash and protest against the camp. Protesters often gather to protest the base, sometimes by dressing in prisoner garb and holding signs. While by law, the base and prisoners are not held to a humanitarian standard, many people are appalled at the existence of Guantanamo Bay and see it as a stain on the United States legacy. This is just another example of the U.S. military being used to facilitate and conduct extremely harmful operations, and reflects a broader pattern of the interests of the U.S. being placed above human rights, regional stability, and civilian well-being.